Today on Locked On Red Wings, how much could a healthy Husso add to a potential playoff run?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily J, a WWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's a host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Scotty, off day. Everything feels in limbo right now, right? Like we just want to hit the fast forward button and talk about the fact that the Red Wings are playing the Washington Capitals, or we want to recap that game because the playoff implications are huge. And we will surely get to that in this episode, talk about those playoff implications of just the next two games in general as well. But there was a move made by the Red Wings today that could also, if they make the playoffs, be a huge, potentially huge spot of support for the Detroit Red Wings. This person won't be the primary source of success for the Red Wings, but could offer an opportunity for somebody who has been definitively overlooked or overworked until this point, a chance to take a break if need be. And that would be Ville Husso, who is going to a conditioning stint to the Grand Rapids Griffins. He's going to play one or two games against Rockford this weekend with the Grand Rapids Griffins. And that means, using previous context of his last conditioning stint, where he played just one game, earned a shutout with the Griffins earlier in the season, back in December, that he is close to returning. So with that being said, there's 5 games left on the schedule, and the Red Wings play 3 times before those 2 games, right? They play Pittsburgh, they play Washington, they play Toronto on Saturday. That leaves the last 2 games of the season potentially, if he's deemed healthy, that he could factor into. But we hope, as Red Wings fans, at that point, our fate is already sealed one way or the other. We don't want it to go to the last 2 games with 2 huge games on Saturday and Sunday. On Tuesday and Thursday, rather, for the Red Wings. My question for you, Scotty, is if Ville Husso, the conditioning stint goes well, and he returns to the Red Wings, how much could a healthy Ville Husso add to the Red Wings lineup for a potential playoff run?
Yeah, well, it is. This team is just hilarious. Like, just even as we have the huge collapse, and then Husso has been kind of, dare I say, even forgotten about. Like, this was a guy that going into the season was the presumed 1A of a team that was carrying 3 goalies. And we haven't talked about him in forever, obviously, because he's been hurt and hasn't played in forever. He unfortunately comes back for 1 game and then just re-injures himself. And it's so wild to me and funny to me how all of this is going to come to a resolution at one time. And yeah, like, I would welcome the addition, obviously. As you said, Lyon is a guy who has just been worked significantly more than anybody anticipated he was going to get going into this season. And so getting Husso back would be great. I think that a majority of people would rather see Husso in net than Reimer. And I think when it comes to the post, I don't want to really get ahead of myself too much and start talking about playoff hockey, because that seems like a very dangerous and slippery slope of a conversation given where the Wings are at currently. But as far as the push up to it, I mean, yeah, I guess my question to throw back at you would be, let's say he is healthy. How many games is he even playing though? Like, from now until the end of the regular season, right? Like, how many, especially the next 2, you're going to see Lyon and Lyon. I can't see any way in which the Washington and Pittsburgh aren't lying and lying. So then you go and you look after that, right? Next week, if they've clinched at some point, then sure, you can get them some experience just to get them some experience before, and experience isn't the right word, some playing time just in general before the postseason. But if you're not clinched, then I don't know how it's not just kind of lying from here on out, to be honest.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. And I know you said you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but like getting ahead of ourselves is the only way that Ville Husso could factor in, right? Making a hypothetical situation where the Red Wings do clinch. It's very 50-50. I think the Red Wings' chance of making the playoffs right now is literally 50%. They control their own destiny, which is awesome. After having been as terrible as they were, to get back into a spot where they control their own destiny, that's such a good thing. But it's not a guarantee to make the playoffs.
Certainly.
But I mean, if you're looking realistically, with the fact that back-to-back is the back-to-back against Montreal comes next week, and Ville Husso's playing in Grand Rapids this weekend, the first game that he could possibly factor into for the Red Wings is, I would assume, the second half of that back-to-back. You're playing a home-and-home against Montreal. You would assume you would start Alex Lyon at home, and then maybe you start him on the road. But then the question is, do you even start him? He comes back healthy. Do you even play him? Because, like, let's look at the numbers in the season, right? I think in our heads, right, we have a bias towards Ville Husso rather than James Reimer. We've been pretty critical over James Reimer, but Reimer still has a 9.75. You round that up to a 9.07, rather. 9.75 would be amazing.
9.75.
It's a 9.07.5. And so if you round that up, it'd be a 9.08 save percentage on the season, which is around league average. So as crazy and frantic as he looks in net sometimes, he's making the saves. And luck or not, like, he's making the saves. His goals saved above expected on the season is 6.8. His goals saved above average is 2.55.
Did Lyon get a win in March?
I don't know if he did off the top of my head.
I can't remember. He might have
Three of them,
the last win.
The only 3 wins that the Red Wings got in March were on James Reimer games.
Okay, I knew that was right at one point. I just didn't know if I couldn't remember which game, because Lyon won early in April, so I couldn't remember which game was in which month. But yeah, so I mean, there you go. Again, Lyon looks great lately, and he's going to be the in net for both of these next 2 huge games, obviously. But Reimer was good enough to get some wins at least in March.
The question isn't whether or not Husso's going to steal starts from Alex Lyon, because that's not going to happen.
Right.
If Ville Husso plays, it's going to be because he steals a start from James Reimer. But I don't know if Ville Husso, with coming back from his second injury, this team going into a crucial time, is going to earn that spot. Husso's numbers on the season, by the way, before I get into Ville Husso's, Alex Lyon in the last 6 games played has a 930 plus save percentage. He's back. He's absolutely back.
For sure.
But Ville Husso on the season, he has a 8.93 save percentage, well below the league average. He does have a positive goal saved above expected, which honestly, as a goalie on this team, it's hard not to. I'm not trying to take it away from him. Like, he's still making more saves on pucks that should be in the back of the net than expected, but that's because this team gives up so many shots.
Yeah.
He's still 5.91 below average. He's still 5.91 below the league average goals saved amongst goaltenders. And again, a lot of that has to do with the team around him. It's not a great defensive team, and in front of him, he gets shelled every game. But I mean, you look at really James Reimer's raw numbers and the fact that he's been healthy. Can he steal start from James Reimer? And I think that's going to be the tough part, because going down this very volatile stretch, let's say if he does come back, if that game matters, that final game of the year matters, you're not going towards Ville Husso. And you go into the playoffs, you're only going to go to your backup if your starter, which is Alex Lyon, doesn't play well. And at that point, the question is does a Ville Husso coming off an injury give me more to work with than a James Reimer? And I'm not sure if that's true, just simply because James Reimer's been here and he has a decent numbers despite, our own biases against him. And I don't know if I still think, and I still believe that Ville Husso's ceiling is much higher than James Reimer's at this point, right? Like, Husso's still young. Reimer's going downhill. I think Husso's the better goalie at their peak. We've seen Husso at his peak, but James Reimer's the one getting results right now. So I think the potential of a healthy Husso is there, but I don't know if he's going to be able to get the starts to prove it.
Yeah, I just don't know when. Like, again, this is just recycled from what I said and then what you piggybacked off of. Like, I just don't know when is there even an opportunity for him to play unless you clinch before the Habs back to back.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, if you clinch a playoff spot for before the Habs back to back, that's your window to get Husso a start.
And that's super presumptuous.
Yeah, like even though I think Husso's the better goaltender than Reimer at their peaks, like I said, I just don't know if the window's there to start him. So
yeah,
unless both Lyon and Reimer crap the bed, and then you're having a situation like back in December where you're like, okay, Lyon, here's your chance.
Right. Next guy up. Yeah.
So we got to take a quick break. And when we return, Scotty and I are going to talk about the magnitude of the next two games because they could very well determine your season. So stay tuned for that in segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs or slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. And Scotty, we've said this phrase many a time the last month or two. Biggest game of the season, right? Like we joked about that when they played the Islanders back in March and then played the Capitals after that. Every subsequent game is the biggest game of the season at that moment. This game against the Washington.
That's what happens when you are right on the bubble of a playoff spot for a month and a half. You have a lot of biggest games of the season.
Now, the Penguins play today, yesterday, by the time you're listening to this, they play in Toronto. So results pending there. If Pens can go into Toronto and win, they'll have the second wild card by a point, but you will have a game in hand. If they lose, you'll have a game in hand and a point in hand, which will be massive. But Washington, who's a point behind you, and Pittsburgh, who's a point behind you as of recording this, are on your slate coming up. The upside to this, if you manage to beat both of those teams, you are staring at a potential 5-point lead, taking into a point you already have against both of those, going to the final 2 or 3 games of the season against those respective teams. The opportunity for the Red Wings to run away in the second, run away as much as you can, really, because like even with 3 games left, the opportunity to blow it is still there.
Sure, which this team is capable of doing.
Right. But we saw in January and February, they are capable of building that padding back up and rising to the occasion. The opportunity for the Red Wings to put themselves in an opportunity to clinch the second wild card with 3 games remaining is there. And so like the magnitude, because on the flip side, right? Like if they lose both of these games, you no longer control your own destiny. And even if you win out the last 3, it's not a guarantee that you get in. Like these 2 games, much like the conversation we had in March when they had that week of easy games, these 2 games are going to make or break your season.
100%. And even maybe saying even more so isn't fair, but tonight's game especially, right? Like this game against Washington is absolutely massive, and we'll obviously preview that in the 3rd segment. But yeah, both of these games tonight and then on Thursday, obviously, are 2 teams that are right in that mix with you, and because of doesn't matter how we all got here, right? There's teams that started off lower and got better. Obviously, the Wings had a horrific, monumental collapse, but it's all the same now, and you're all on next to even footing now. Like last week, it was really big to have all those games off, so that the games in hand went away. Right? We talked about that a little bit.
That was
in
massive
some of our
for us.
off days last week. Like that's a huge thing for the Capitals to not only now have the same amount of games played as you, but they lost both of those games that they had in hand. So now you're sitting pretty going into this hockey game against them. So yeah, these next two games are going to I don't want to say single-handedly determine it, but
pretty much.
It's pretty close. It's pretty close. It's going to be really hard. If you were to drop both, it would be really difficult to recover from that. And if you win both, well, I'm not even going to finish that. I'm not putting that out into the world because we know that they're capable, but you're going to put yourself in a really, really good position if you win both.
So I agree with you about Washington being the more important game, and I will say it because of two reasons. One, it's the first game on the schedule. Like, you got to win the first one to win the second one. Like, that's not true. Like, you can win the second one later. But for the second one to matter more, because if you lose the first game, the second game isn't going to matter as much because of the fact that you'll be back, if that makes sense. Like, some people will argue that it matters more because you'll be more desperate for the win. But, like, you need the first domino to get the second domino to fall. Like, you need to continue to build this snowball going forward. Like, if you win the first game, the second game becomes a little less important, a little less desperate. I even hesitate to say that. They both matter equally. They're both are must-win games. I'm sorry, there's no way I can frame this that is going to make it sound like every time I try and frame it in a certain way, it's not true. They're both equally important. But what matters with the Washington game is because they're the only team that you can feasibly catch in regulation wins.
Yeah.
And that's the first tiebreaker. Pittsburgh has the first tiebreaker regardless. They have 4 more regulations. They have 31 regulation wins. You have 27. Unless they lose out and you win out all in regulation, you're not catching them. But that overtime loss to the Ottawa Senators on Sunday was so massive because now you're just one regulation win behind the Washington Capitals for the first tiebreaker. So let's say you tie in points at the end of the season, but you're able to tie them in regulation wins. The second tiebreaker is regulation overtime wins, which you have by 4 games. So there's an opportunity here for the Red Wings to get to a position, which obviously you just want to win outright by points. But if you're looking at the nuances of this, there's an opportunity for the Red Wings to win this game in regulation against the Washington Capitals, tie them in regulation wins, so you get the second tiebreaker in regulation and overtime wins. And obviously there's still 4 games after that for both teams, but this game matters on so many different levels to win and win in regulation. So not only do you have the edge in points, but if for God's sakes, if you lose out and they catch you in points, you still have those tiebreakers. You're not going to catch that with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has 4 more regulation wins than you. And while you do have the second tiebreaker, you have to tie in the first tiebreaker to get to the second one. Yeah. So bottom line is you got to win both these games. Like, I'm talking about the nuances, but it's just like my whole Twitter thing I've been doing lately is just win. Just win. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. You win both these games, you're in. You lose both these games, you're most likely out.
So naturally they'll split.
And if you split,
because that's what'll happen, right? Like that's been the entire season has just been, you know what, we're gonna be whether it's go on a huge hot streak and catapult ourselves into the position of having what was it, an 8-point cushion at one point, right? And everything was firing on all cylinders, and then the monumental collapse after, and everything since the beginning of March has just been, this team is going to do just enough to stay in and keep the conversation going and keep the drama going. And they're not going to eliminate themselves, but they're also not going to guarantee and lock up, a spot either. And I obviously, more than anything, want them to win both of these games. I'm fully expecting a split.
So let's say they do split. What then? Like, are we back or are we over?
Question. Great question.
I don't know what the schedule is for Pittsburgh or Washington before or after these games. I just know what the Red Wings schedule is like. But if you beat Washington, right, you're up by 3 points on them, but then you lose to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is then 1 point again behind you. So you've pushed Washington down, but now Pittsburgh's still hot on your tail. I mean, then just win.
Just win.
Just win. That's all you can do. And preferably win both, please.
Please.
I would very much appreciate that to make my life so much easier. It gets confusing when you talk about it like this and we talk in circles. It gets confusing, like trying to think of all the possible different scenarios. The easiest scenario to swallow is just win. Take care of business.
Just win.
Each of these 3 games or these 2 games between these 3 teams are going to determine 2 teams' seasons. It's
just win.
Let's not fall face first into the playoffs. Let's earn it. All right? Just win.
Just win.
We'll go to segment 3. Scotty's been waiting for me to stop talking and go to this ad read. So we'll take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk specifically about the Capitals game and what to expect from them as they're tumbling right now. They haven't been great since they beat the Red Wings. So stay tuned for that in segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. It is well past the halfway point of the NHL season. We are almost through with it. We just detailed in far too much detail the importance of these 2 games. And regardless of where the Red Wings are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is the #1 choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like, I'm gonna run it back from yesterday's episode, Scotty. Studs like Kane, Raymond, Larkin, Joey Fisticuffs Veleno, Jeff Haymaker Petrie.
Wow.
Will record more or less than their sleeper projections with things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus or more in a given game. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Red Wings fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get 100 times match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. As you guys are well aware at this point, they're playing the Washington Capitals. And the Capitals, much like the Red Wings, went on their hot streak. And they skyrocketed into the playoff chase, right? For a moment, they were holding on to that second wild card. But since then, they haven't been so great, right? They've been losing more games. They are actually on a losing streak, a 6-game losing streak since beating the Red Wings 4-3 in overtime just a couple weeks ago. And they're now fallen behind the Detroit Red Wings. They've lost their game in hand. And much like the Red Wings, when they went on their 7-game losing streak, we're finding out they are who we thought they are, which is a team that's goal differential is -41. A lot of their winning streak was, stop me if you've heard this before, carried by goaltending. Charlie Lindgren went God mode. Well, he has since come back down to earth. Alex Ovechkin also turned back into Ovechkin. He scored.
That's what I thought you were going. I thought you were going to say, stop me if you've heard this before. Alex Ovechkin gets hot and carries the Caps for a little bit.
Well, and that's also true. He scored, I think, 21 goals in his last 32 games.
Yeah, he's been kind of okay. Yeah.
One shy of 30 on the season when he, a month ago, wasn't even at 20.
Right.
Like, absolutely insane how much of a heater he's been on. But that's it. You know, their points leader is Dylan Strome, 64 and 77, not even a points per game. Like, we have a point per game player in Dylan Larkin. Like, they don't even have what we have in that regard. So this is a bad team. Granted, the Red Wings have gone through the same tribulations. So it's like, this is an extremely beatable hockey team. We talked about it a few weeks ago. Their metrics almost the same in terms of how bad they are at 5-on-5 as the Detroit Red Wings. These are two teams that are trying to fall into a playoff spot. And now they were both presented with an opportunity to get it right. Now, hopefully, just like the Red Wings did a month ago, can extend their losing streak for one more game. You know, right? Red Wings lost 7 in a row. Capitals at 6 in a row. Let's hope they lose one more game here. But, I mean, this is an extremely beatable hockey team, and the Red Wings are playing better hockey as of late, even if the results aren't going their way. Like this, not only for the playoff implications, but presents itself as an opportunity to continue to build on the limited success that they are seeing. You know, not just say, oh, well, they played well in this hockey game and they didn't get the results, but have an opportunity to win 2 in a row, to have that domino effect, to have that snowball, and then hopefully leading into the playoffs if they make it, not to get ahead of myself, but it could present them an opportunity to be on the right foot heading into a potential playoff matchup. So like on so many different levels, even outside of the playoff race, this is an important game for the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah, man. This team, this Capitals team isn't like that great.
They're not.
And I don't say that in a like ivory tower sense. I mean, we just lost to them, right? A week and a half ago. I fully understand that. I'm not trying to make it sound like they're awful, but like this, you look at their team stats. We talked about it last time we played them. Not a whole lot has changed. They've done a lot of losing since then, if anything. Like they don't rank that well in anything. The style they play is again has been really bailed out, like you were saying, by good goaltending and then a huge uptick in scoring from Ovechkin. And this is a massive opportunity to not only win a hockey game, just period, in the thick of a wild card race, but win again, as we talked about in segment 2, your biggest game of the season up to this point. This is very, very obtainable.
Absolutely. I mean, their fourth most leading scorer is Anthony Mantha still. Post-trade deadline, their fourth most leading scorer is Anthony Mantha with 34 points. They have two players in Dylan Strome and Alex Ovechkin who will cross the 60-point plateau, 60-point marker, rather, milestone. Then it's John Carlson at 48 points. Like, up and down the roster, the Red Wings have a better roster than the Washington Capitals. So there's no excuse to lose this hockey game. I don't care how poor the Red Wings have been playing over the last month. In a must-win game, desperation mode, yet there's no excuse to lose this hockey game. So, Scotty, what do we say?
Just win.
Just win.
Just win.
Just win. I don't care how. Just win.
Yep, I completely agree, brother.
Games around the league as of Wednesday. We talked about Tuesday, and you'll know but the results by the time you're listening to this. Another big game happening in the playoff race. Philadelphia, who's on a 7-game losing streak. Dude, nobody wants this playoff spot. We've joked about it, but Detroit goes on a heater, loses 7 in a row. Islanders go on a heater, lose 6 in a row, back on another heater to be in the Metro. And now both Washington, who goes on a heater, goes on a losing streak to fall back out. Philadelphia, who's been overperforming all year long, just like Detroit was, 7-game losing streak or whatever it is, falling out. Nobody wants this playoff spot. They're playing in Montreal. They're like the only other team I'm worried about right now. The Islanders are facing the Rangers in New York, New York versus New York, and in the Islanders Stadium, UBS, I think it's called. So that matters if you want to stay above that Metro line in the third, which is still attainable. I think you're only 2 points back of that, but take care of your own business. Destiny is in your hands. Like, you control your own destiny. Nobody has games in hand on you anymore. So you have the second wildcard spot with nobody having games in hand on you. Just win.
Just win.
Like that. You know what? I'm sorry if you listen to the whole episode, because you know what? This whole episode could be summarized with just win.
Just win, brother.
I mean, shit, man. Like, I'm just. We come on here and we got to talk to you guys about something for 30 minutes. Like, that's just how the format of this show is. But I'm going to be blunt with you. Coming into today, there is nothing on Scotty and I's mind besides the fact that they play Washington and Pittsburgh and they have to win those games or it's over. That's
why segment 2 was let's talk about the whole season, and segment 3 was let's talk about one game. That is all on anybody's mind.
And Husso wasn't Husso. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's all that's on anybody's mind. And like the Husso news is news. That's something that we obviously discuss and wanted to talk about and should talk about and whatnot. But this is the biggest thing that is happening in the Detroit Red Wings organization today as you're listening to this, and this week are comfortably these two hockey games and nothing else. So that's it, man.
It's like when I let off the episode and I was like, we're in this nebulous, weird zone where we're floating around and we just want to hit the fast forward button to talk about the Washington Capitals game, because like There's nothing else on anybody's mind besides that.
Yeah.
There's nothing that is important besides these two games. Like, we could have come on here and talked about how Lucas Raymond, again, has been a breakout star this year. Hell, we could have a conversation about Sider and Raymond having A's sooner rather than later. Like, that is a conversation we could be having, more of an offseason conversation, sure. But, like, we're at a point in the season now where we have talked about ad nauseum everything. And now I'm off on a tangent. The show's over. Like, if you guys want to tune out, you can. But I'm just venting. We're at a point now, like, we have talked about everything we could possibly talk about on this season. All that's left that matters is these last 5 games. That's it.
And it's make or break. Obviously, we're either gonna keep talking about hockey, and after whenever the season ends, 15th, 16th, we're gonna keep talking about hockey games and start talking about playoff hockey for the first time in either of our tenures here, or we're gonna transition into off-season mode, and then we'll have like you said, we have plenty in the chamber for the off-season, obviously, but that's it. It's these next 5 games for the rest of your lives, kind of thing. So,
you know, it's going to be an interesting conversation when the offseason does start, hopefully after a playoff run of some sort. Conversations around, is the season a success, and us reviewing what we think of Yzerman's job so far. That's going to be 2 interesting conversations, but that's for the offseason. We still got to make it there. But Scotty, if we transition into the offseason mode, there is good news. We still have a playoff run we get to talk about.
Yeah.
We're going to be covering the Grand Rapids Griffins if the Red Wings don't make the playoffs. Did you not realize that's what I was talking about?
No, not at all.
I will be watching Griffins games religiously if the Red Wings don't make the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So will everybody, I hope.
But we all would prefer the Red Wings.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be one or the other, but yeah.
So, all right. Be back tomorrow. We ball, just win. Same time, same place every day. Please win.